Hello and welcome to Improving Developer Productivity, Status Updates Without the Interruptions. I'm Nathan Stuhler. I'm Development Manager and Lead Software Developer at Unstoppable Software. We're a consulting company where we allow our clients to focus on their core business instead of worrying about software development. In this webinar, we're going to go through some of the things that slow down software development teams, namely interruptions, and how we can do some things to get around that and improve productivity. Now, throughout the years, there's been a lot of breakthroughs that have improved software development. Things like object-oriented development has increased the level of abstraction. It's allowed developers to focus on the higher level business problems. And then other strategies like agile methodologies have allowed teams to adapt and write relevant software with smaller teams. It makes me wonder, what will the next great breakthrough be? Now, perhaps the most destructive concept to a programming team is something we've known about for a long time. It's interruptions. We have companies out there like Fog Creek Software. They're trying to educate the community about the importance of silence in a developer's office. They do things like put blog posts out and share their office layout and their architecture so that people start to understand the importance of that. Yet still, a lot of startups believe that the most effective way to get people to work is in development bullpens. This is an open environment where it can be very loud and people talk to each other, so it does improve collaboration in some ways, but it definitely optimizes for interruptions. It makes me wonder then, is that the next great breakthrough? Just reducing these interruptions in the workplace? Can we create better habits to allow us to hold more information in short-term memory so we can reduce bugs and work faster? What if we could solve this with just the available software tools that are out there? Now, the importance and the prevalence of interruptions is not something new. We've known it for a long time. The book Peopleware identified this problem decades ago. And yet, we still have the situation where it's pretty common where a manager may pop in and ask, "Hey, how's it going?" Or, "What's the status on this project or task?" Or if a team's behind on a project, they may all work together in a war room. Well, if Peopleware was right, and developers' flow states were so valuable, then it's truly important to reduce the interruptions. Similarly, having a project manager ask, "Well, where are we now?" seemingly every hour, is a way to update the progress for that project manager, but it essentially stalls the project for that moment in time when he asks for the status, and then that continues and things have to ramp back up soon after he asks that question. It basically grinds things to a halt every time that he asks the question. So now, what are some of the things that we can do to improve productivity and reduce interruptions? We can use some of the tools that are out on the internet. Granted, the cloud has put a lot of information out online, and it helps us to access that without having to interrupt each other. So let's say there are a host of tools that centralize all the information, and what it enables is an amazingly powerful concept. We call it asynchronous transparency. So instead of being bothered by another developer or a project manager and feeling like you always have to communicate status back to your boss or to a client, instead you update these central databases. For example, at Unstoppable Software, after fixing a bug, we resolve it in our bug tracking software system. And then when someone else wants to see where things are, he or she doesn't have to bother the developer who was working on the bug. They can just look it up in the system and see an up-to-date list. So I know this isn't a breakthrough topic, but we feel like we take it a step further. Our management beliefs are that we have to have transparency in multiple directions. It's a key tenet in our approach, especially important for remote teams. We have examples throughout our business. We display a project budget burn down to the developer. So as the developer is going through and closing out tasks, we can show them how the remaining amount of work relates to what the project budget is, especially since that budget was based off some of the estimates that the developer gave in the first place. We open up our backlog databases to the client. As I mentioned, we have that central database for our bug tracking software. We can show that to the client so that they can have an understanding of what's going on with the project and where things are. And we also send demo screencasts, which can be viewed at any time. We're trying to empower our team members to get the information they want without interrupting others who would traditionally keep that information. Now, we don't entirely eliminate same-time communications. That would be silly. We still get everyone in a room together or on a virtual meeting together from time to time, and we still do daily stand-ups. We also don't share everything. It may not be appropriate to share billing rates or customer lists, things like that. But over the past 8 years, we've established a suite of application development tools that we feel work extremely well in our process. We have things like project planning software, like FogBugs or LeanKit. We use time tracking, source control, GoToMeeting, Sprout Video for sharing screencasts. And they help us to work more effectively with our competitors. It works especially well when our client is remote or not local. These tools allow asynchronous transparency, a guiding principle helping to reduce interruptions and improve productivity. Let's get into the strategies for reducing interruptions in flow. First, we want to embrace asynchronous communication. In the words of Brian Tracy, continuous contact is not essential. In other words, if communication is not required to resolve an emergency, it's not completely urgent, then it should be delivered in a way that allows the recipient to just access that whenever they need to. In that regard, email can be better than chat or texting. Centralized project information can be better than in-person meetings. So something we do a lot of times is instead of gathering multiple people all at once for a big meeting or a big demo, we'll record a screencast and we'll put that online for people to view that when it's convenient for them. We'll put a password on that just so it's not out in the public domain, but that helps for things to be asynchronous because we send off that important information, but it doesn't require a response right away. And we want to keep in mind that the best way to be asynchronous and to have that advantage is to be as transparent as possible. You see, I'm able to get more information if things are transparent and they're already out there. I may not even know what information I need to ask for unless it's out there. And that would require me to interrupt someone and ask them. We also break down large projects. We use an agile, iterative methodology. So we separate big projects down into smaller milestones or sprints. And we feel that creates more transparency. It also reduces risks. Now, the reason we think that it creates more transparency is because if you have a big project and it may be over a month since you've seen any progress on it, any tangible output of that, then it's really frustrating and you want to ask, what is the status of this? When you're in the dark, you want to ask and you want to interrupt for continuous things. You feel like you have to get on people to get that information. But if you break things down into smaller outputs, then you can see that continual feedback and you don't feel like you have to interrupt people. in our way of doing that with the smaller sprints, we can also still use a scientific approach, and we do that with estimating and release planning so that we can tell when a project will finish with a certain statistical probability. We also embrace online software or programming tools that are in the cloud. As I mentioned, we've developed a set of tools that allow us to use our agile process, and we try and focus on the present. Okay, so how are some of the ways that we improve access for clients? We give our clients access to FogBugs, or our project backlog. In this way, the clients can see the status of a project, what remains to be implemented or fixed. We also send those Sprout video screencasts. We use Sprout Video to host them. We password protect it, we send it off to the client, and they can view it on their own convenient schedule. How do we improve access for developers? We have one of the same strategies, works both ways. We store items in FogBugs, and developers can see that project backlog in FogBugs. We allow the developers to use the tool to estimate tasks and see what's next. It's a great centralized tool so that all the developers on the team can see what's going on. And it provides similar benefits to other tools that are out there for project planning, like LeanKit. We also use source control. Now, pretty much everyone does who's a professional developer. We use Subversion or Git, depending on the project, and it allows developers to easily have access to different files, but what they can do is both access the same file, and it should work pretty well not to interrupt each other or to have any conflicts if they merge that information back in. Improving access for managers. Hey, look what we found here. We have the items list in FogBugs again. It's our central project backlog. So this is a great way for managers to see what is still remaining to be done in a project. And this piece of software uses something called evidence-based scheduling. It predicts that probability that a project milestone will be finished by a deadline. And on Unstoppable Software, we have developed an internal product that is a burn down chart, and that is what maps that project budget against the estimated time remaining on a project. This really helps us because it shows us some of the velocity of our team, and if we are entering into a troubled area on a project, and it just helps to have a high-level view for our managers. Lastly, we need to beware tools like Slack or chats. There are good and bads with both of these. Slack allows people to collaborate really well with each other. There are rooms where people have conversations, and you can search back on that. So you could have that history of conversations, and you can go back and look for knowledge in that way. But it tends to make people feel like they have to be connected and communicative in the Slack rooms. It's just a breeding ground for interruptions. Something that we've done with this is we have our source control commits going into Slack. This can be nice because if you're waiting on something to be committed into source control so that you can get the update, well then you can just wait in Slack and see when that comes in instead of forcing the developer to notify you when they're done. That's another option. You could do that too. So something that can help to battle the downsides of chats or Slack but still get some of the benefits is to be able to go unavailable or offline. If you're on a chat, you could set basically your away message to be unavailable, or if you're in Slack, you could just turn that off and not go into that for a little while you're trying to have heads down coding time or just high-level thought time. That concludes my webinar. I think you've seen how important it is to reduce the interruptions. It can come with problems to do that. It can be difficult because you still need to get that information. But if this reminds you of some of the challenges in your team and you'd like to speak to us about how we might be able to help, then reach out to us at the link below and we'll get right back to you. Thank you.